Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Robery, and we have in the studio with us tonight, guys, my co-host, Jackson Robery, and we're glad to be back with everybody tonight. And, Jackson, we're really glad because we are now just, a couple of days away from duck season here in Louisiana kicking off, man. So I know we've been talking about it the last couple of episodes, and really since the end of January when the last season ended, us as waterfowl hunters, we're always looking to get rocking and rolling again on a new season. And now, Jackson, we're just a couple of days away. Is it kind of setting in for you now? You're getting excited a little bit?
I'm locked in. I just want to go in the woods.
Yeah, you locked in. Yeah, you wrapped up, man. We've been playing a lot of sports this year after hunting season kicked off. And those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis, or you may be tuning in right here on the video format on our YouTube channel, you guys know Jackson's been pretty busy this summer, man. You've been playing a lot of sports this year, and we just finally wrapped all that stuff up this week over the last couple of days. And you came to me and you said, that's it. You said it's game time now. It's time to get going.
It's the season.
It's the season. That's exactly right. So we sitting here tonight. We're recording this episode, guys. And for those of you joining us on our YouTube channel, we do appreciate you tuning in for the video version of the podcast. And as well as all the listeners that are joining us on all the streaming platforms, whether you're in your vehicle listening to us, we do appreciate you all once again for joining us. But with it being just a couple of days away, we are going to kind of participate this weekend. And we have a couple of we have two zones this year here in Louisiana for waterfowl hunters. And you're going to have one zone opening up this weekend. They had a youth weekend last weekend, and the reports that we got, Jackson, it seemed like on the western side of the state, we had some friends of ours that hunted for the youth opener over there, and it looks like the numbers were pretty good, man. What did you hear from some of your buddies that you talked to?
I just heard that for the people who had water, I mean that they did pretty good.
They did real well, yeah. And what kind of species were you getting as far as what's made its way down so far? Because we're coming off of a full moon. We had a big full moon. The end of October, that's usually when we get our first big push of birds into migration. And that seems to be what guys were experiencing last weekend. But what kind of species specifically did you hear were being harvested during the youth weekend last weekend on the western side of the state?
Mainly teal. I heard a lot of teal. I heard a couple of mallards for like some of the people like more up north, and then I heard a couple of gadwall. Obviously, but mainly teal. Mainly teal. That seemed to be a big part of it. But I agree with you. I heard gadwall, good bit of gadwall from what I'm hearing right now. Which we always say that if we joke about it. We say the gadwall nowadays are the new mallard here in Louisiana. So I'm excited heading into the start, of the season that they're showing good gadwall numbers. That's something to get excited about. I'm happy to hear that if that is the case. Now, I've heard guys tell me on the eastern side, closer to where we are, that they've done some scouting over the last couple of days, and they said the numbers weren't as good on the eastern side of the state. But, who knows? That could change in just a couple of days. We do sit tonight as we record this episode. We kind of have a little warming trend going on, which those of you who listen to the podcast, maybe you're in the upper portions of the flyways. We had that big front that came through, that big cold front that locked some of the places in the upper portions of the flyways up for a couple of days. And then all of a sudden we got that warm trend that moved in right after it. So what we often refer to that as, and Jackson, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of usually like a stale period when that warm weather follows it. And it seems like it stays like that for about a week or two, maybe even longer in some portions before you get, another big cold front, especially when you get a big cold front early on in the season. So that's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays into it. But we do expect another cold front is showing this weekend that's going to be hitting here in Louisiana. It's nothing major, not no Arctic front, nothing like that. But it's going to be enough, I think, to keep that migration coming down south, down the flyaway. So looking forward to a little bit of cold weather, happening this weekend just in time for the opener for one portion of the state. Like I said, they had the youth opener last weekend. They're going to open up their rest of the season for the rest of the hunters in that zone. You and I, we're going to be participating in the youth opener for
the western side of the state this weekend.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing that, and it's a little different. Last weekend, the youth on the other side of the state had 2 days to hunt.
Yeah.
But this weekend, we only get 1 day to hunt for you guys in the other portion of the zones. And the way Louisiana does that is they do it that way, and they instead of us having 2 days for the youth this weekend, they're going to allow you 1 day now and 2 days at the end of the season. So it's set up a little differently for the youth hunts here in Louisiana. But something that is cool that I forgot to mention is it's not only youth weekend, right? So we also, a couple of years ago, Louisiana adopted a deal for veterans and active military. So to go along with the youth weekend, we also get veterans and, active military. They're able to participate in this youth hunt. And this weekend, we're going to be taking one of our good friends, one of my childhood friends, along with us, right? So tell everybody kind of how, Mr. Troy, he's going to be joining us, Mr. Troy Fontenot from Ville Platte, Louisiana. And he's a veteran. He was in the military in the Air Force, served his time in the military. So I'm glad that those guys get to experience that. That's something I think is vitally important. That's a small token of appreciation for anybody who fought for our country and served our country and continues to serve our country. So, man, I really like that. I'm glad that they get to come along. And to be honest with you, when I was talking to you about where you wanted to go, I said, hey, I'm going to leave it up to you. It's youth weekend. Do you want to go make a hunt in this side of the state, or do you want to go somewhere else? And you picked out a specific area that you've been wanting to hunt, which we're not going to say too much about that area right now. And I'm sure you guys can understand how that is because it is public land. But we're gonna make that hunt this weekend. It's an area that you've never hunted before, so you're kind of excited from what I'm assuming to make that hunt. Tell me what you're thinking about that.
I'm just excited to kind of explore like a new area that I haven't hunted. It's a kind of a different type of hunting that I haven't tried yet before, which I think I would really like. But I mean, I think it'll be a little bit easier, and especially if we have birds, I mean, it'll be really fun.
What you thinking as far? We spent a little bit of time there, scouting it out just a couple of weeks ago, kind of looking at those areas that we're going to be hunting on Saturday. What's your kind of anticipation? What's your prediction as far as what you think we could see, or what you might be able to take home and harvest this weekend?
I mean, I think what I hope we could see is some good numbers of birds. I mean, on the specific spot we're going, which I'm not going to say where, I mean, I feel like we could get maybe some wood ducks, definitely some teal maybe, and I mean, maybe some spoonbills or some Hollywood, same thing, but hopefully a
little pintail maybe for you.
Mallard's always a bonus.
Mallard's a bonus. That'd be an early season bonus for us here this early in the season. But this area that we're gonna hunt for the youth weekend this weekend, it's an area that I hunted growing up, and it's a wide variety of birds. When you get birds down in Louisiana, you get a good push of migration down the flyway. You could kill all those species you mentioned. You could get pintail, gadwall, spoonbills. You could get teal, which, hey, while we were scouting out, we saw teal during teal season, or right after teal season, actually, is when we scouted it out. And we saw some pretty good groups of teal, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. That's promising to see. I think you're right. I think, if they flooded this particular area just a couple of weeks ago because we haven't had much rain. Y'all know that we've been in a drought. We mentioned that and talked about that in previous episodes, but you're not going to get much help from Mother Nature, although we are supposed to get a little bit of rain Friday. So they got a little bit of rain predicted for Friday, which may be able to help out a little bit. But for the most part, the area that we're going to hunt is a flooded area. That there is man-made flooded. So that's hopefully going to help things out. They've had a little bit of water on the areas we're going to hunt for several weeks now. Hopefully enough time to kind of get some of those migrating birds down, get them in there without any kind of pressure, get them rested up, get them comfortable if they're going to sit there and eat, because they got plenty of food source in that area. And hopefully they get acclimated to where they feel pretty comfortable. And then this weekend, we might have a little bit of success. So what I'm looking forward to is actually just being able to sit back and video. So I plan on shooting some video. Hopefully we got content to bring you guys on the YouTube channel and on our social media platforms. If they have a little bit of luck, Troy and Jackson, I'll be right there with the cameras and filming it all. And I'm kind of excited about that because I've talked about this before. It is sometimes very hard. You guys who have YouTube channels or you do social media and you out there filming and hunting, it's very hard to do both. And Jackson, you know how that is because you tried to do both of them. It's pretty tough to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So to be able to sit back, actually hold the camera, kind of film, do everything from behind the scenes, I'm looking forward to that because that's a big part of what I enjoy doing now. I still got that drive to be the one that wants to hunt too, so it's hard to do both, you know. But we're going to be behind the camera. We're going to do I'm going to do some filming, and hopefully you guys are going to have a successful opening youth hunt this weekend and veterans hunt. And we'll get a good idea kind of what birds in the area for this specific region of the state that we're going to be hunting. So looking forward to that, you know.
Yeah.
So, but tonight, guys, on this episode, you know, we're always talking about topics. Whether we have a guest on the show that we find is very interesting that you get, God, that we find interesting, and that you as the listener audience may find interesting. We're always looking for new topics to discuss. Well, tonight, Jackson he hit me up with an idea. He said, you know, Dad, he said, I've always came up hunting with you. He says, but something we've never really talked about a whole lot in episodes that I've been a part of is I got a lot of questions from when you started out hunting, when you were a youth, and when you were going with Grandpa and, you know, your great-grandfather. I've always heard you talk about stories, but I've never really got to ask questions about it. So tonight, you wanted to kind of be the interviewer and kind of interview me tonight. And you said you had some questions and you want to hear some stories and stuff like that. And I think that's a great idea, man. When you can't approach me about that, I said, you know what? You're right. You know, you've never actually got to ask me a lot of that stuff, you know, that you might want to know. And I figured, hey, what better time to do it than right here sitting down with our audience and doing it right here on the podcast, man. So I'm gonna let you have at it, man. You asked me, I know you said you had questions that you want to drill down on and ask me. So, man, it's all yours, Jackson. You take it away, and hopefully I can bring a little light to some of those answers and questions that you have.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first questions that I had really was like, and I knew like you had a bunch of hunts, you hunted on a million hunts, had some good hunts back in the day, but out of all those hunts, what was your favorite hunt probably that you have, like, that you could tell us, and what was your favorite experience about that hunt?
Favorite hunt. My favorite hunt. Look, you're right. I've been waterfowl hunting since I'm little with my dad. I started out with my grandfather, my dad. I can tell you this. I can tell you the most memorable hunt that I ever had. And you're going to probably hear some crazy stuff tonight that I talk about, and some embarrassing stuff for me, maybe some of it, but I'm going to tell it because it's stuff that happens to you know, and it's stuff that happened in real life stories. So we'll talk about some of that, I'm sure. But my most memorable hunt that I've ever had, I'm not going to say my favorite hunt, but my most memorable hunt, the thing that comes to my mind is the first duck that I ever harvested when I was a kid. Yeah. And I think a lot of us remember that. I think whether it's a deer, whether it's a squirrel, whether it's a rabbit, a hog, whatever it is that you hunt, wherever you grow up at in the United States, and you grow up in a family that's full of hunters, or maybe you go on your first hunt with somebody who's a friend or a friend of the family, something. We always tend to remember those first kills of whatever species we're going after. Yeah. And, you know, when I was a kid, to answer your question, the most memorable hunt I had was my family. My family growing up, my dad's uncle, we had family land. They had a lot of family land. And his uncle was a big duck hunter. And the woods that we had were out in the country that they owned. Let me say that. Not we had. They owned it. And it was a big wood duck. It was a big wood duck place. And, I mean, it was loaded with wood ducks back in the day. And back then, when I was a kid, it was two. If I remember right, it was 2 wood ducks you could kill back then. I'm almost certain of that. But I remember never having shot a duck. And, you know, I had been on a couple of hunts with my dad and my great uncle and my grandfather. And you know how it is when you're little and they drag you through the woods. I was probably 7 or 8 years old at that time. And, you know, they drag you out there those first couple of hunts, man. And at that age, you're really trying to get a bird on the water. That's what you're going after. You're trying to get a bird on the water to be able to have that little kid shoot, you know. And I was that little kid at that time. And they had these nice wooden blinds, these old traditional, you know, the old nice cypress blinds, built up, brushed up. And I remember we didn't hunt. They had several of us hunt that morning, and we didn't hunt the number one blind with my uncle. That was his blind. And he had a couple of guests with him. So he put me and Dad in a blind that was a little bit further down in the woods. And this area was surrounded by buttonwoods. It was cypress trees, oak trees, and buttonwoods mixed in this area. And I remember I had been on a couple of hunts, cold, freezing, miserable. Got to see some action, but I never got to pull that trigger. Never got to put that gun and that barrel up on a bird myself. Yeah. And I remember them wood ducks, man, squealing as a kid. I could hear those wood ducks coming through the woods. And at daybreak, I heard, they had some come in and they landed in those buttonwood trees. And my dad's like, okay, this is it. This is it. And I can remember this perfectly. He's like, this is it. This is your chance right here. He says, do you see those wood ducks on the water? And, man, I'm looking, and I'm like, yeah, I could kind of see them moving. And then I saw clearly a drake come out. Yeah. And at that time, you don't really know. I was so young, I didn't really know what a drake was or a hen was at that time, But I remember those colors, and I remember how pretty that drake wood duck was. Yeah. And they were just swimming perfectly. You know how those wood ducks, when they're coming through the woods, they kind of bobbing that head. You know how they kind of swim, they bob that head. So it's coming through the woods, and he said, "That's it. Get your gun up." And at that time, he had got me set up with a 20 gauge. I was a big kid, so yeah. I didn't shoot a 410. I was shooting a 20 gauge, crack barrel, single shot. That's what I had, just like you guys started out with when I started with y'all. And I remember, man, him saying to me, he's like, you got one shot, make it count. He told me that, and I got that barrel up, and it seemed, Jackson, like it was 10 minutes before I pulled the trigger on that wood duck. And it wasn't. It really wasn't, but it seemed like that to me. And I just remember seeing those beautiful colors on that wood duck and thinking, I was so excited, like, this is it. This is it. I got a chance, And I put that BB on that wood duck, and, man, all I remember is just boom, and looking up at that point. The minute I shot, I remember looking up to see, and it was cold. It was a cold morning, and on them cold mornings, you could see that smoke coming out of that barrel. Yeah. And I could see that gun smoke coming out of that barrel. And I asked him, I was like, Dad, did I get him? Did I get him? And he's like, you got him. And I remember that being so happy, that feeling, knowing that I had took a good shot and I got my first duck. That's probably my most memorable hunt. To this day, I could tell that story just like it happened, like I just told to all of y'all. Yeah. So that's my most memorable hunt. Now, my best hunt, that was actually the question, your best hunt. That's tough, man, because we had a lot of good hunts coming up, One of the best hunts I ever had was with a group of friends. We were down hunting public land here in Louisiana. We were at Spring Bayou. That's the wildlife management area up in Marksville, Louisiana. And we had started kind of scouting that area out. This was, I don't know, Jackson, I was probably, I was in my early 20s maybe at that time. And we had went down there. We had started having some success. They had a good bit of birds back then. And we had scouted out the day before, and we found this hole way in the back of the reserve. And we nicknamed it Devil's Den. That was the nickname that we had set up. And I don't know how that name came up. Somebody came up with that name, and we called it Devil's Den. But it was the very end of the wildlife management area. And for those of you who are familiar with Spring Bayou Wildlife Management Area up in Marksville, it's not a big wildlife management area. It's pretty small. As a matter of fact, you've been there multiple times now with it, that through the years coming up. But this particular hole we found was a little small hole, and it had mallards that were coming into it when we scouted it. Teal, they had green-winged teal that had showed up pretty heavily. There was a big front that had come through. And we went and we did it. We did it not legally. I'll say that. We did it. When I say that, I mean we went in early. We slept in there overnight is what we did.
Pow, pow, pow.
We went pow, pow, pow. What you mean?
You went pow, pow, pow.
We at night? No, we didn't shoot at night. No. That's what you're asking?
I meant the next morning.
Oh, the next morning. Yes. So we got in there the night before. We slept, froze our butts off. We slept in there so we could make sure that we had got that hole. And honestly, we never had nobody ever try to come into that hole. We kind of got off the beaten path a little bit. But we wanted to be there. We were jacked up. We were ready to go. And that next morning, Jackson, I'm telling you, we set up and we were kind of in this strip where there was a long, skinny bottle of water that dead ended into this spot we called Devil's Den. And what we did was we were outside of the boat. We got in these buttonwood trees. There was a cypress break with some buttonwood trees around it. We got in those buttonwoods. And I remember being in the water, staged out in those buttonwood trees. And it was kind of deep because we had chest waders on, but the waders, I mean, the water was pretty close to the top of the waders. So we were standing in some pretty deep water. But, man, when I tell you that daybreak started coming around, and those, boy, you could hear it in the dark before daybreak, actually. You could hear them mallards. They were quacking. And then we heard some gadwall, and then you hear them peeping from them green tail. Pintail, we could hear them in the dark, which we never killed any pintail that day, but we heard them before shooting light. And when daybreak broke, man, those birds started working in, and there was a big cypress tree, I remember, to the left. If we were looking at the hole in those buttonwood trees, we're standing against the buttonwood trees to break up our outline. And to my left, there was a giant cypress tree that was probably about 20 yards away from where we were standing at.
Yeah.
And I remember the pattern. Those birds would come from behind us because they had some ag fields behind us, and they would kind of break off to the left, and they would go over the front of the hole, make that hard left bank, and they would circle that hole and kind of look at the decoys. Where we knew we had them and where they were working perfectly that day is when they hit the top of that cypress tree. If they got to that level of the top of that cypress tree, that was their butt. They were coming. They were committed at that point. Yeah. And sure enough, if you would work a group of birds, they would come in, and it was one group after another, coming in. When they would circle and they'd hit the top of that cypress tree and they would come in, we'd smoke them at that point. And that's probably finding that hole, sleeping in that hole overnight, just kind of, roughing it, which we ended up doing that a lot coming up, being honest with you. Sleeping overnight, sleeping in holes, camping out, scouting, doing all that stuff, just to make sure that we could get the holes that we had scouted out. We did a lot of that. But that particular hunt was probably one of my most memorable just because it was one of the last great hunts in Louisiana that I could remember me having. That was greenheads. Yeah. Because we don't see greenheads like we used to. You know that, and you never got to experience that real, in your lifetime coming up so far. But at that time, they still had quite a bit of greenheads in Louisiana. So that was probably one of my most memorable hunts that I had killing mallards in the last years.
Yeah, I haven't even killed my first mallard yet.
You haven't got a mallard yet? Mm-hmm. We haven't got you a mallard yet, huh? Damn, I didn't realize that. So you're 13 years old now. You've been coming with me since you're about 5. Now, you weren't hunting at 5. You were just coming along with me. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's how – I mean, we hunt public land, and that's just how it's become, man. We just don't get those mallards anymore like we used to, Yeah. So – but yeah, that's probably one of my most memorable hunts there. Yeah. I got a lot of crazy stories with hunts there.
Yeah. What was I got another question. What was probably I know I said your most favorite hunt, but what was probably the most goofiest hunt you ever didn't go well, just got all messed up, and y'all actually ended up killing probably?
Actually, one of the goofiest things we ever did was with you when you killed your first duck. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
So, okay, so this was how old were you? Do you know? Ballpark? 9 years old. Jackson's probably 9 years old. We're trying to get him his first duck. We rushing public land. Once again, we rushing to get to a certain spot. We're trying to beat the crowd, but at this time in my life, we were doing it right. 4 a.m., we'd go into the wildlife management area. I wasn't doing that stuff I was doing when I was younger, sleeping overnight and all that stuff. But we were going, 4 o'clock. We left. We had the boat launched. We took off to the spot we wanted to get to. And we get to the spot. We set up all the decoys, all the motion decoys. We hung out of a boat blind because we were kind of in an open area. And we set everything up, put the blind up. We sitting there kind of BSing, just talking. And it's still not daylight, obviously. We set up early enough, And I go to get my gun out of the gun case, and I'm like, man, where the hell's my gun? And I look at you, I said, Jackson, where's the guns? And you're like, I don't know. And of course, you're 9 years old. It's not your responsibility. And I'm like looking, I'm fumbling around the boat. I look at Dustin, who's with us, Mr. Dustin Jubenville was with us. And I was like, Dustin, where's the guns? And he's like, well, I know we put them in here. And he goes, well, no, we didn't put them in here, baby. Well, we forgot the damn guns in the truck. So we had to go back. We had to take the blind down, crank the mud motor up. We had to run back to the launch. It was about, 15 minutes back to the launch to go get the guns. So we left our guns in the truck. So as hunters, that's real responsible when you leave your guns in the truck. So that's probably one of the craziest things I did, irresponsible wise, as far as from gear, need my gear to make a hunt. Because that's the first time that had ever happened to me, as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Now, you really want to hear a crazy story? When I was a kid starting out, I'll tell you this. This is embarrassing, but I'm gonna tell it because this is good stuff right here. Y'all gonna want to hear. So I'm on that family property. I'm young. I'm 8, 9 years old with my dad. It might have been younger than that actually. And because like I said, I was going at 5 years old like you were. He was taking me with him pretty much everywhere they'd go. So we had this family land, and I was talking about those nice duck blinds that they had. We were hunting with my uncle, my great uncle, the one that I told you was blind number 1. That was the hot spot blind. And we in that blind, and I had coveralls on. Back then, we didn't have the clothes that we got now. We didn't have that good clothes like we got now.
Yeah.
So we had that old cotton stuff, and you had so many layers. When I was a kid, I couldn't even move around. There was so many layers, so just to stay warm. So anyway, I got the bubble guts. I must have ate too many little Debbie's that morning or whatever, or something didn't agree with me, and I got the bubble guts as a kid. And I remember telling my dad, I was tapping on them, and they had wood ducks just coming in. We had some teal that morning they killed, if I remember right. But I can remember them wood ducks whistling coming through the woods, and they bing, bang, they shooting right at daybreak. And I'm about to shit my pants. And I'm like, Dad, I gotta go to the bathroom. And he's like, well, just go. What you gonna do? Just go. You gotta go, So the way this blind was, it had a porch built off the back of it, where you pull the boat up underneath it. And then it was pirogues that we'd go in with, and then we slide them up underneath this little rooftop, and this little where the blind was lifted up off the ground. So I said, well, where do I go? He says, hell, son. He says, go to the back and grab onto the post and swing around. He says, swing over the water, and he says, do your business. So he's aggravated with me because they trying to kill birds, Yeah. And here I am, I'm about to shit my pants. I'm like, God damn, I gotta go. So I'm a kid, I'm 7, 8 years old. I'm just trying to see what I need to do, So I remember going to the back of the blind. I'm trying to be quiet, man. And I get to the back of the blind, and I kind of pull my coveralls down, and I'm like, okay, well, he said swing around the post. So I said, I must have to hold on to this post and swing my butt over the water, Why? So look, I'm a big kid. I'm not doing this either. So I wish we'd had cameras back then, because this is funny crap probably to have filmed or seen in person. So I swing around. I got my coveralls down below my knees, and I swing around. I got my cassons, which is what we call underwear here in Louisiana. The French call them cassons. Yeah. I had my cassons pulled down as far as they could go. And I just remember squeezing them butt cheeks till I could try to balance myself over this thing. And man, I swung, almost fell in the water when I swung over because my coveralls got hung up on the post. And I just let it go. And when I let it go, I shit in my coveralls, filled them son of bitches up in the coveralls. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, knowing what had happened to me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know what to do. I'm panicking. I'm sitting there just letting it go. And most of it ended up going to my coveralls. So I'm like, Dad. He's like, what? He's like, be quiet. I said, Dad, I cracked in my coveralls. And he's like, what? He says, what? I said, I'm sorry. And I started like crying. I think I was crying. I thought he was going to beat my butt. So he's like, what? So I hear him putting up the gun, and my great uncle's mumbling some stuff over there, and I'm embarrassed as hell by this point. And he comes check on me, and he's like, how the hell did you shit in your damn coveralls? And I was like, I tried swinging it over. I said, I let it go, and it went in. And he was so aggravated with me. So he made me strip down. He was washing my coveralls in the lake where we were on that. trying to get all that shit out of the coveralls and the clothes. I'm sitting there in my underwear, freezing my butt off, waiting for him to clean my stuff. And then he handed it back to me wet. And he's like, "Here, you better put it on." He says, "You're going to be cold." He said, "But you're going to be colder if you don't put them on right now, being in your underwear like that." So yeah, that's a pretty crazy story that I haven't told a ton of people about right there. But you know what? That's part of growing up hunting, and I think a lot of people probably got stories. Maybe not quite like that, but they probably got some of their own crazy stories themselves. But yeah, as a kid, I learned quick how to take care of my business in the woods. After that,
yeah. So another question.
Hit me with it.
So I'm kind of on the hunt, like asking you about hunts and all that. So I got another one of your like hunting questions. So I ask you about favorite hunt, embarrassing hunt, goofy hunt.
That was the most embarrassing hunt.
Yeah. So what was probably like, and I'm talking like limited out, got out of there. What was your probably like quickest hunt you ever had? Limited out, got out of there early.
We've had some quick ones over the years, but once again, we hunt public land, and you know, a lot of times it's not a quick limit. At least for us through the years, it wasn't a quick limit. I would tell you back in the day when I was talking about that time period when we still had a good bit of mallards, all that type of stuff in the state. It seems like we would limit out quicker back then than we do now. Be honest with you, Jackson, I've never been. You know, some guys, you see them on social media, man, they you know, especially nowadays, you know what's going on with social media. They get on there and they're like, "Oh, limit 6008." You know, and not 6:08 a.m., but you know, shoot time starting at 6, and they on there bragging about how they got a limit in 8 minutes. Basically, it's to see how quick that they could get a limit and post it on social media. But to be honest, I've always kind of been the opposite like that. I'm the type. I'll stay out there till legal time is over. Like for us, 2:00 in the afternoon, 1:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. I like just being out there, you know. Now, being a public land hunter, especially nowadays, we don't have the luxury of limiting out real quick a lot of times, you know. But you know, it happens time to time. It does happen. I would say we had a couple of hunts. I can't remember any specific one of how fast it was, but I can tell you that there was hunts through the years where we limited out pretty quickly. Most of the time, from what I could recall, it was teal hunts. A lot of teal hunts, like teal season. Yeah. We limited out quickly. You know, like within an hour or so. You know, growing up hunting the rice fields and stuff like that, where I grew up in Evangeline Parish, that area, we'd go to some of those rice fields, and it was loaded with teal during teal season.
Yeah, I mean, during teal season, if you either have the teal or you don't.
Yeah, exactly. They're either there or you don't. So, I mean, if you're sitting there in teal season and you waiting, you know, an hour to see a bird, well, you're not in the right area, you know. But I remember growing up when I was hunting the rice fields, in the ag fields and all that stuff. For teal season, that's probably when we get our quickest limits, you know, because of teal. Blue wings would show up, and they were just in those rice fields, and it was heavy. So we limit out pretty quickly back then. But man, you know, limit out quickly, since you and I have been hunting together, that really don't happen a lot. You know, if we're going to limit out, it's going to take us a little while to limit out most of the time. You know, now, and it also, you know, the more guys you with, it makes it tougher too. You know, so if you got more guys in your group you're hunting with, that's more birds you got to kill. So you know. Limit out, you know. So if it's just me by myself or me and you, then there'll be those occasional days where we limit out a little quicker than we would if we have a bigger group, obviously. You know. But
and another reason why y'all probably limited out on teal back in the day is because you know why?
Why?
Teal, they always bring friends.
Teal bring friends. That's exactly right. We say that all the time. Teal bring friends. When you see teal, it's not usually just one. They got friends with them. So
usually a big old group.
It's usually a big group. And, you know, we were talking about that the other day. Me and another guy were talking, and he's just telling me some of the things he likes about waterfowl hunting. He had got into duck hunting. And I told him, I said, man, you know, one of the things that amazes me to this day is when you see a big group of teal. And, you know how quick they are and how they maneuver, but how they maneuver together on point in sync. Like when they bank left, for instance, you know, or bank right, to do it so perfectly when there's 30 of them together.
Yeah.
How the hell do they know how to do that? There's not. You can't tell me there's one dumb one in the group that when the rest take a left, he takes a right. You never see it.
Yeah, see me like
you never see that.
I've always said I wanted to be a duck if I ever turned into an animal, but I mean I couldn't be a teal. I mean, like all my friends would go to the right, and I'd just be the dumb one, keep going and get shot.
Keep going. I mean, it's amazing. Like I know it's instinctively, it's something that's just bred into them, but for them to fly as fast as they fly and to bank left, bank right, swoop up, swoop down, I mean, it's amazing to watch, man. It's still, I remember as a kid teal hunting in those rice fields and seeing that and just being amazed. That's one of the things besides hunting those wood ducks in the woods on my family land that we had was that really got me hooked on waterfowl hunting as a kid. And it was teal hunting. And because it was so fun, it was so fast paced, a lot of action. It's a great way to get somebody who's a youth involved in waterfowl hunting. Yeah. You know, I do see a lot of people. We get questions. You know, we get questions from people that watch us on YouTube or, you know, social media or listen to the podcast. They'll hit us up and ask questions sometimes. And I've had people ask me, they say, man, when's a good time to get my son involved or my daughter involved in duck hunting? You know, when's a good time when's the best month? I've been asked that before. And I tell them, I say, hey, if you have an early teal season in your state or wherever you're located at, and you have access to property where they are holding teal, that's the best time, in my opinion. Yeah. Because it's a lot of fast-paced action. You're going to have some action go on. Because the one thing that I find kills it for anybody who's trying to get somebody involved in hunting, especially a kid, is when it's slow. It's boring, you know?
Yeah.
That's what, you know, you go to an area where you're not seeing birds and you bring in a kid and it's cold and he's freezing his butt off and he's not having any action, then guess what? He's probably not going to like duck hunting until he has a good experience.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't know. That's another thing with me. Like, I don't know why I got hooked. I got hooked on it like I did. Because, I mean, whenever on my first couple of hunts, which I mean, I don't kind of really remember that. I mean, I remember my first duck I ever killed and all that. But, I mean, it wasn't very, very fast paced for me either, besides like the wood ducks and all that we would see.
That's right. And I think it's persistence. I think a lot of it is just I kept bringing you. Yeah. I kept bringing you until you had a good experience. And when I mean a good experience, not a comfortable experience necessarily, but a good experience as we had action, you know?
Yeah.
And when you had that action, I remember it. You know, when you killed that blue wing teal that we talked about, or the hunt we forgot the guns, that was your first duck you killed, you know, blue wing teal. When you killed that first blue wing teal, I could see it in your eyes. It just changed you that day. You were like, okay, I want to do this again. Yeah. And then you build on that. You have a little bit of success on another hunt. And then it makes you more hungry. And you say, okay, I want to do that again. Yeah. And then you have something else, another experience happen to you that's positive. And then you might go on that hunt, like we hunt the timber a lot. You know, here in Louisiana, we'll hunt the woods a lot, you know, especially second split of season. And that's a different experience from hunting the marshes of Louisiana, because you see different birds. Sometimes you see the birds completely in a different environment, act completely different.
Yeah.
When you see those wood ducks coming through them trees and how quick them suckers maneuver and don't run smack dab into a big cypress tree or a big oak tree, it's amazing to see. When you see on a timber hole and those mallets hit those treetops or those gadwall, because we don't see a lot of mallets nowadays, like we talked about, but gadwall, when we see those gadwall hit those treetops, and that's your first time seeing that, guess what? You hooked automatically at that point.
Yeah.
And that's how you were. You were exactly like that.
Yeah.
Every experience that you had, you wanted to repeat it, and then you'd have a better experience, and that passion just kept growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And it got to where you are now. And, you know, here I am. I'm 45. I'm 44 years old. I forget my age. That's how old I am now. So, you know, I look at a lot of my friends. Like I heard our friend Mr. Nate the other day. Mr. Nate was talking. I was listening to a podcast he was on with some of the guys that he got to know. And he said, I didn't realize this because, I talk to Nate from time to time. We've got to know each other through this whole social media market and all that here in Louisiana. We kind of have a brotherhood with a lot of the creators that are here in Louisiana. And Nate said that I think said he was 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I stopped for a second. I was like, God damn. I was like, he's only 30 years old. I was like, I'm 44.
Yeah.
I'm 14 years older than Mr. Nate is.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm still doing this public land grind at 44 years old. When a lot of my friends, really, it made me stop and think. I was like, man, I kind of look back and I'm reflecting and I'm like, man, my friends that I'm talked to in the industry are not even my generation anymore, you know? Yeah. And I hate to sound like I'm old because I'm not an old guy. I'm 44 years old. I mean, there's a lot of gentlemen who may be listening to this show that are older than me and much older than me. Yeah. You know, you look at guys like Mr. Dale Bourdlong, you know, he's a different generation than I'm in. Yeah. You know, you look at Mr. Warren over at Godell. We hunted with Mr. Warren and Mr. Lance and them last year. Mr. Warren is one of the OGs in Louisiana of the waterfowling industry. You know, he's been doing it longer than most people that are still able to hunt now. You know, so you look at all these generations, but what it made me realize that it was the guys that I talk to on a regular basis that I'm friends with in the industry and in this sport now. Man, I'm older than these guys, and here I am. I'm still grinding on public land.
Yeah, I mean, and some dudes, I mean, they get to like their 20s or 30s, and they're like, man, let's just get some private land. They can't take the public anymore.
Yeah, well, not that they just can't take it; they don't want to take it. Yeah. You know, so I get it. I get when guys say, man, I do have friends that'll ask me. They say, man, how the hell y'all still hunt public land? You know? Yeah. And you know, I think everybody's situation is different. Is it? Hey, I can't afford to go get in a lease. No, that's not the case. We can afford. We're fortunate enough to be able to afford to go get in a lease. And I'm not saying I wouldn't get in a lease if it's something that I thought would benefit us and we could kill birds and we could have a good time and have good experiences. But the thing that drives me on public land at 44 years old, and I've said this before, is the challenge. Yeah. It's the challenge. It's not about the limits.
And meeting new people.
That's it. The challenges and the friendships is what absolutely drives me to still hunt public land right now. And I look back and I've been in leases before. Back in the day, I was in a couple of leases. And the problem I found with leases, when the duck hunting started tapering off in Louisiana, you know, years ago, we were paying a lot for a lease. You know, it's not cheap. Nowadays, it's $7,000, $10,000, $10,000, whatever you had, depending on where you had it, it's going to run you a lot of money for a lease. And I felt obligated when I was in a lease to have to hunt that lease, even though we didn't have a ton of birds. Yeah. And the one thing, you know, with waterfowl is that it's a migratory bird for a reason. They can be here today and they pick up off that water tonight when that sun goes down and they fly somewhere else within a couple hours. Yeah. To where as a deer hunter, you know, you do your time, you put in your time scouting, you have deer holding to your property, you kind of can learn the patterns. They stay around for the most part, you know? They could. Well, waterfowl's not like that. It's completely different. So when you pay for a high dollar lease or you gamble on a lease, let's say you gamble on a lease for convenience, then and you are paying that much money for a lease, then you feel obligated to kind of hunt that lease throughout the season. You know?
You better be like planting crops or doing something to keep it going.
Well, that's a part of it too as well. But when you paying that much, you feel obligated to hunt it. And if you don't hunt it and you go somewhere else, I used to get the feeling that, hey, I'm not getting my money's worth. But at some point, when I got out of the lease deal, I just kind of looked at it. I said, am I paying for quality of hunting or am I paying for convenience? And I was paying for convenience mostly.
Me, to be honest, I mean, if I joined a lease, I wouldn't feel obligated to hunt it. I mean,
well, when you gonna get a job one day here in the next couple of years, you're gonna be a part of working society, and when you're gonna have to write a check for a lease that you decide to get into for $7,000 of your hard-earned money that you just work for to save, and you gonna get excited when you get into that lease. You're gonna go out there, you're gonna brush blinds, you're gonna do everything you can to get ready, and then you realize there's no birds because, hey, Mother Nature brings conditions like this year, droughts, or years where we get too much rain, or maybe the birds just don't like that area, or maybe the lease you got's not a good area. You know, you don't know sometimes. You know, then you're gonna probably feel different at that point. You're gonna probably feel like, hey man, I probably need to hunt this thing. I paid a lot of that.
Like after years of just public land hunting, like I mean, Yeah, okay, my lease don't have birds. Just go find the birds.
Well, yes, and you can. There's nobody holding you to that.
And
but
I've seen
that money's holding you at that money that you forfeited and paid out of pocket to get that lease is what holds people back sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen people do that before. Like I've seen people like where they'll get leases, and I mean they won't hunt them some years because they don't do it. But then like maybe the next year that lease could be loaded with birds.
Yes, and it could. It changes. Like I said, conditions change. But you're not going to want to pay $7,000 to $10,000 a year for a blind and not hunt it and wait for it to get good again. Chances are, you know, you'll say, "Hey, well, we're not seeing birds. We're not killing birds. There just ain't no birds here. They don't like this area." You're going to get out of it and you're going to go find something else. Either you're going to try to find you a better lease somewhere else, or you're going to start hunting public land again. Yeah. And that's what we did. We started hunting public land. Our group started hunting public land. And like I was saying, kind of going back to that, I look back the other day when Nate said he was 30 years old. I was like, man, Nate's a baby compared to me, you know? And here I am at 44 years old, and I'm still doing it. And man, some of my friends look at me with some of the hunts we make, me and you, and some of the things we do. And I'm not in shape like I was when I was a young buck. I'm fat and overweight and older now.
That's what you got me for.
That's what I got you for some things. That's right. That's better than a dog sometimes when you have a child. But look, it ain't easy. Something got to drive me to get out of that bed at 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. And honestly, what it is what we talked about. It's that challenge to go out there and have a good, successful hunt on public land. And it's also the friendships that we make, man. I can't tell you how many friends, and you know this, how many friends have we made at boat launches over the last, several years since you've been able to hunt with me, seriously hunt with me. How many people have we called friends now, or we can pick up the phone, call them, get a report in an area, or text them, or share some information with somebody.
Or show up to the launch and not have to worry about what hole or whatever they're going
to. That's right.
Just because we know they won't worry about it.
Yeah, because we respect each other. We know each other, And that's what keeps me going back, man. It just I'm passionate about that. It fires me up. It keeps that fire burning in me, and that's what keeps me going. On public land.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answered your question there.
Yeah.
What else you got? What else you want to know?
I don't really have many more questions. I mean, that's pretty much what I wanted to ask you about all the hunts and your opinion on that stuff.
Anything like as far as mounts went when we were kids, any of that type of stuff? First duck that I mounted, you had asked me that the other day. That's why I'm bringing that up. What was my first duck mounted? Wood duck. Man, don't have it no more though. Don't know what happened to it actually. So my first duck was a wood duck that we mounted. That was I remember that it was killed on that family property. I remember that. But I don't know where that duck went. For some reason, I got lost over time.
My first mount was a wood duck, and my first duck was a teal.
You kind of blew that teal up pretty good. We weren't able to do too much with it.
Well, it got freezer burn.
It got freezer burn too. Yeah, we waited too long on it, which that's kind of sucks. But I remember we shot it up, and we were kind of debating whether or not it would be something we'd be able to mount. And honestly, the reason we waited is because I really didn't want to mount it if it was messed up pretty badly, on that. I wanted you to have something that was in good shape for your first one. And you ended up getting a wood duck. You remember that? You remember kind of tell that story on your first one there that you got.
It was actually we went to bring the teal, and I was so upset because I couldn't mount it. And then it was on a Saturday, and that Sunday after we went hunt. A wood duck came in. I shot it, and I was like, it's going on the wall, because I was like, next bird I kill is going on the wall, because I was just so upset I couldn't mount that one.
Really?
Yeah, so I just shot it.
Yeah. So where you shot it at? That one?
I shot that one in the timber.
In the timber, you shot it. In the timber somewhere. Yeah. I remember that morning. That was the. I'm trying to think of the name of the hole. Tornado. We call it the tornado hole. That hole. You shot that bird in the tornado hole.
That was in January.
You remember in January it was? Yeah. See, I remember it well. You dropped it. You remember, was that the same hunt whenever we shot a couple of them wood ducks? They went in all that sawgrass, and we had to go looking for it, and you found one of the ducks. Was that the duck? The one that you found? You had to kind of go way into that sawgrass.
No, that was a hen that I found.
That was a hen you found?
Yeah, I remember.
Was that the same hunt, though? I don't remember.
I think that was the Saturday before.
Really?
But I remember mine just fell in the decoys.
Really?
Because I remember it came around the corner, just went up, and it just fell.
It fell, yeah. You know, going back to one of the quick questions you asked me a while ago, we were hunting down in the Chaffalot Basin. This was several years back. And I had a couple of buddies that I worked with that had never really duck hunted too much. And they were like, man, they always heard me talking about duck hunting and stuff. And I was like, man, y'all need to come. You need to come. And one day they were like, hey, you know what? Let's go. We're going to go with you. We're going to go with you. And I said, okay, cool. So, man, at that time, I had like a little 1436 with a little 9.9 Mercury on the back of it. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because this area that we hunt now is chocked up with Sylvania and water hyacinth and all that type of stuff.
You were able to fit a Mercury in there?
Yeah. Back, hey, I didn't have a mud motor till just about 7-8 years ago. But, yeah, back then, man, when I got my first rig, when I got out of college, my first little setup I had was a 1436 little bass tracker topper, little crab boats, lightweight. The cool thing with it was lightweight, but nothing durable, real durable. But hey, look, it did the job. It did the job. I mean,
nowadays, you either got to have a kayak or a mud motor to get in there.
Well, yeah, to get in those areas. And I had a 9.9 Mercury on the back of it, a little 4-stroke.
Yeah.
And I would put that thing in shallow water drive. You could tilt it up on the bracket and it would click into place.
Yeah.
And I'd put that thing and I would freaking go through those backwaters with it. And it had grass, but it wasn't chopped up, like solid like it is now in some of the areas. And man, I would spit mud out that thing. I was throwing that thing. You'd hear me when I'd hit a log, it'd kick up, and that damn propeller I was putting it through hell, but I was using it to get to where I had to get to.
Was it peeing out duck seeds?
And once it got clogged, it wasn't pee out nothing. I'd keep a little. My grandfather had taught me this years ago about keeping a paper clip. I'd keep a couple of those big jumbo paper clips in my boat with me. And whenever some people use weed eater string, a lot of guys, we used to do that on the big bass boats we'd use. But on those little motors, he'd keep like those jumbo paper clips. And whenever those motors would clog up, that water impeller would clog up, I'd stick that little paper clip in there. And I'd unclog it, and boy, they'd have some duck seed fly in there, some mud, whatever it was I was going through. But anyway, I was kind of getting off track there. But we were talking about a quick hunt. But we piled me and 2 or 3 of them other boys in that 1436. And we went to this piece in the Chaffalot Basin that we were public land hunting. And we set up in there kind of at an intersection. And I had been seeing some teal in there when I scouted it. But it had been blue-winged teal. Now, this was like in late December, early January. But they still had some blue-winged teal. It was kind of warm that winter. I remember it being kind of mild. So I guess the blue wings had kind of moved back into the air, or some of them maybe really never moved out. And we were sitting there, and I told them, I said, we have a chance to kill some teal. I saw some teal in there a couple of times, scouting it over the last few days. So we set up. We kind of got at that intersection point, and man, I remember like the first hour we didn't see nothing. A couple of wood ducks, but they were educated. They knew kind of where not to pass. They'd go through the woods, cut through, but nothing. I'm sitting there, man. I'm like, God dang! I brought these guys on their first duck hunt, and we ain't gonna see crap. I'm thinking that this sucks. It's gonna be a bad experience. And I remember all of a sudden, man, after about an hour, we're sitting there and kind of think everybody's kind of, effing off a little bit, and then I got the guns leaned up against the trees. We're standing in the water up against some bug brush, and boy, I hear over our heads come from behind us in the timber. And when I look up, there must have been 40 teal. And it was green wing teal. It wasn't blue wings this time.
Yeah.
So they had them green rockets that came over the treetops. And I mean, they were so low to the treetops, you could hear that all them wings just come through, So, man, they came over us and they went straight down. We were in a V, basically. It made a V where we were at this intersection. Yeah. So you could see down the waterway to your right. You could see down the waterway to your left. And, boy, they hit that strip and they went right down that strip. So, boy, I was fumbling for my teal call, and I got my teal call, and I had a blue wing teal call on me. And, boy, I did, bam, 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 bam. I hit it. And I saw them suckers bank like we were talking about a while ago. They banked like a 747 to the left. Well, when they banked to the left, it was trees. It was like an island in between us. So we couldn't really see the birds if they were going to be coming at us, until last minute right there where we were. It was kind of a pinch point area where we would have those birds cut through. So, boy, I saw them bank off. And I told them boys, I said, hey, grab your guns. And, boy, they fumbling for their guns. I said, get ready. I said, because I have no idea if they're coming or not. I said, but if they get to us, I said, they're going to be on us when they get here. Yeah. Jackson, when I tell you I hit that teal call one more time, I did. Bam, bam. And about the half note on that second blow I gave it. All of a sudden, about 7 or 8 of them just from the left side of that open area hit, and they were already below the trees, right, coming into us. And, boy, you could hear them. You looked at them, and those wings, they were trying to hit them brakes. They're wobbling when they're coming hard. They were wobbling like that coming at us. And I looked, and them boys pulled up. And when they pulled up, I said, no, because right when they pulled up, I had seen the whole rest of the group was coming from the right side. Yeah. And them babies were coming in just like them ones from the left were coming in. Hey, and we pulled up, and they shot them boys on those ones on the left. I shot, but the ones on the right, when I yelled, hold on, they kind of flared up, so I had to kind of play cleaner. And all you saw was toof, 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 toof. They were just dropping. And I think we ended up with like 12 of them out of the group that we ended up knocking down. It was crazy, man. Like we were knocking down green-winged teal, and we took a beautiful picture. I remember that hunt. It was almost all drakes that came in that group that we knocked down. It was the craziest thing. Because
a boys club.
Yeah, it was like a boys club type deal right there, man. And I remember, and you've seen this picture before, but we got them setting up on a strap on a tree, and it's all green-winged teals. It's some big, fat, chunky, healthy green-winged teal. Yeah. And that happened that quick, where we had like close to our limit right there on that one hunt, just with that one group. We ended up having another group of teal come in with some more green wings, and we got a few more of those. And we limited out that hunt, but that group, it happened very quickly. Not that it took us about an hour to get a group to come in, but when it did happen, it happened quickly. Yeah. And that's what I mean by happening.
Fast and Furious.
It was fast and furious right there. But that was beautiful. Hey, and I tell you talk about guys getting hooked on a hunt. When them guys saw that, they were like, "That's it." That was. One of them turned around. He just started like belly laughing. He's like, "That was fucking awesome." He's like, "Dude, that was awesome." He said I think one or two of them, they were like, I remember one guy specifically, he was like, I didn't even aim. He's like, I just picked up my gun and shot. He said, they just fell. And I was like, well, next time you want to aim if you can, but hey, pretty good job what you did right there without aiming.
If you hit him, don't start trying now.
He didn't even have to, man. But they were just so in our face right there. So that was pretty cool, and it was pretty cool to see, somebody on their first hunt like that get to experience it, And I've been lucky, man. I've been doing this for so long, like I said, since I've been a little boy with my dad and grandfather and my great uncle I talked about, that I've got to be part of a lot of people's first time hunting, I got to see a lot of people make their first hunts and be a part of that and kill their first ducks and stuff like that. And that's awesome, man. That's cool, man. That's always awesome, and it never gets old. Whether it's a kid or an adult. Like your buddy Jackson, we brought Jackson duck hunting with us a few years ago. Yeah. And we had a really good hunt on public land, man. And you remember that, huh? Yeah. I mean, he had a good time, huh? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what he told you about that hunt?
He just been wanting to go back ever since.
He wanted to go back. We need to get him back, and we need to get him back with us this year, man.
We need to bring him to the timber with us.
We need to bring him in the timber, let him experience that. That was in the marsh that we had went down to, and we had a really good hunt. Yeah. So that was cool. But I mean, it was like me being his father, almost seeing him kill those birds for the first time and experience that. Yeah. So I've been a part of that many times, and that's pretty cool. That just never gets old, man, at all. Never gets old. Yeah. So, well, any other questions? I'm sure you got more. I know you said you had more, and you might not be able to think of them right now, but we could definitely do this again. Yeah. We could definitely do this again. So, well, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. Jackson, I appreciate the questions, man. I'm glad you get to hear these stories, and I got a lot more that I could tell. But we need more time, obviously. So, But I appreciate you wanting to ask those questions and kind of interview me, and it's cool to be able to tell those stories to you. So, but we appreciate you guys as listeners and you guys streaming us right here on our YouTube channel, tuning in to this episode. Hopefully some of these stories you guys can kind of feel familiar with it. But that's really all we got tonight for y'all guys. So we wish y'all the best if you're getting out there to do some hunting over the next couple of days. Best of luck to all of you. Please be safe. Please be courteous. And guys, don't forget to support our sponsors that support us. Thank y'all. Until next time, guys, this is Jacob and Jackson with Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors. Y'all have a good night.